As a young man, I was banned from joining the military by my mum. Probably for the best, to be honest with you. Anyway, so I have no personal experience of this, but I imagine being a Marine isn't the best job for everyone because it demands extreme physical endurance, mental toughness, and an unwavering commitment to discipline and duty. Not something that I could deal with, to be honest. But I guess the lifestyle can be intense. Long deployments, strict hierarchies, and the potential for dangerous combat situation. Yeah, you need a level of resilience and sacrifice that not everyone's prepared for. And I guess there's an impact on your personal life, your mental health, and significantly on your relationships too. Yep, I was not cut out for the military, and thanks, Mum, for banning me from joining. I'll tell you why in the outro here today. But anyway, so we've got several stories here about being not a particularly good fit for the military. So let's begin with A Night in the Ammo Handling Area by Theodore Sullivan. Well, I'm going to be honest with you guys. By every metric, I was a shitty Marine. In my 4-year career, I'd never scored higher than a second-class PFT. Never went to my MOS's advanced school. I was NJP'd twice and non-rec'd for promotion more times than I can count. I barely picked up Lance Corporal, and everyone gets promoted to Lance Corporal. Well, according to my squad leader, section leader, platoon sergeant, and company first sergeant, I have an attitude and motivation problem. They weren't wrong. I don't truly know why I would behave the way I did. Maybe it was just a lack of maturity. I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17, trying to get out of a bad situation back home. I had a troubled childhood. I'd hoped the Marines would be a way for me to move forward. Well, as it turns out, people with troubled childhoods will typically have troubled adulthoods. Every shitty thing I did as a kid, I did as a Marine. Drinking, stealing, getting into fights, being disrespectful to authority figures. Typical bullshit you'd expect from a shitbag terminal Lance. By 3.5 years in, my leadership had given up on me. Whatever, I thought. I only had 6 months left anyway. Our unit was getting ready to set out on its yearly field exercise at a training area a few hundred miles away from our base. I'm not going to name what unit or base I was at, or the training area for the sake of operational security. Well, I guess old habits die hard. As I expected, as soon as we arrived at the training area, I was placed on camp tax. For those of you not in the know, camp tax is essentially where the unit would place all the shitbags such as myself to bitch work around the cantonment area. Picking up trash, cleaning toilets, working in the chow hall, and other such tasks. What I didn't expect was to be placed on AHA watch. AHA means Ammunition Handling Area, and in accordance with USMC regulations, it's far as fuck away from everything else. I, along with 19 other independently minded Marines, were given 2-man tents and several boxes of MREs and were placed in a 7-ton heading several miles away from the cantonment. What makes AHA watch so shitty is, aside from the fact it's in the middle of nowhere, which says a lot because the training area itself was also in the middle of nowhere, is that we had to sleep outside. Now, this base was in the mountains and it got cold as fuck at night. There was no hot chow, no showers, no bathrooms aside from the overflowing porta shitters, and most pertinent to me, no PX. I'd only brought out 1 pack of Marlboros before we'd left our base, and I had 0 snacks. I'd have to sustain myself solely on MREs for the next month and a half. Not to mention the fact that my only company would be almost 2 dozen shitbags and all of the wild goats that lived out in those mountains. On the ride over, I pondered what I could have done to be condemned to this forsaken duty. There's a long list of things to choose from. Was it because I fell asleep on duty? Was it because I got kicked off the last rifle qual range for being a safety violator? Was it because I wrote fuck poges on the wall of the radio battalion's barracks? Well, I concluded that it was probably a combination of all three. As soon as we got to the AHA, a wide dirt field inundated with green shipping containers filled with various types of ammunition, we quickly set up our tents. As soon as we were done, we were put to work unloading the containers. Alpha Company had their first range in a week, so obviously we had to get their ammunition ready now. After several hours of toiling, we finally finished, and I shambled back to my tent to unwind. Well, this was my daily routine for the next few weeks. Wake up, shave, eat, chow, remove ammunition from shipping containers, unload spent shells and cartridges from the back of JLTVs and 7-tons, load the aforementioned ammunition into the aforementioned JLTVs and 7-tons, eat chow, go to sleep, rinse and repeat day in, day out. After one particularly grueling day of indentured servitude, all I wanted to do was smoke a cigarette. I'd been pretty good at rationing them, and I had one left. Sergeant Hart, the NCO in charge of the AHA, had promised us that he'd get us a ride back to cantonments so we could go to the PX, so I could restock then. Well, I walked back to my tent, and right away I knew something was wrong. My tent was open. I scurried over and looked inside. Oh, my cigarettes were gone. Fucking thieves, I thought. As I pondered what I was going to do, I heard laughter. I glanced over in the direction where it had come from, and I saw Davidson standing in the smoke pit smoking a cigarette. I knew for a fact that he'd run out of smokes a week ago, and no one here liked him enough to give him one of theirs. Rage growing inside of me, I stomped towards him. Well, in hindsight, I could have handled that better. I won't go into too much detail, but the situation ended with Davidson being taken back to cantonment to see the corpsman and me being put on fire watch all night. I was going to have fire watch for multiple hours every night for the rest of the time we were out there. Fuck. Sergeant Hart made me the roving watch, so I had to walk around the perimeter of the AHA for 3 hours every night. And this was a position he specifically created just for me. After a few nights of this, I was joined by Davidson. He ended up being all right. All he had was a black eye. He was going to join me every night on roving watch because he instigated our fight by stealing my cigarette. It was a little awkward at first, having to spend several hours every night walking around in a circle with the guy I'd knocked out. But after a while, the awkwardness dissipated, and soon we were talking and laughing like old friends. Him bringing me a pack of Marlboros to make up for the one he stole certainly helped. A few days after we were condemned to firewatch, something peculiar happened. A wild goat was found dead outside the AHA. The goat was discovered about 200 meters down the road from the AHA, in fact. And it was a ghastly scene. It was all torn up, its limbs were stripped of flesh almost down to the bone, and the strangest thing to me was that its head was missing. Because it had been discovered on the road, everyone's first assumption was that it was hit by a truck. That didn't make any sense. I mean, the speed limit on these roads was 15 miles per hour, and it was highly enforced by the chain of command. With how much the road winds and curves, I don't think any military vehicle could even go beyond 20 miles an hour. A truck hitting a goat at 15 miles per hour wouldn't do that kind of damage. After Davidson and I hauled the goat off the side of the road, everyone quickly forgot about it, writing it off as some sort of strange anomaly. Things continued normally for a few more days, until another goat was discovered in the same state as the first. Someone postulated that there may be some sort of wolf or coyote in the area, and that had been what had killed the goats. That would make a lot more sense than our first theory, as it did look like some sort of animal had gotten to the goat. But like our first theory, there were problems with it. Now, according to our wildlife safety brief, the goats living in the training area were an invasive species with no natural predators. The state had to occasionally bring in hunters to thin down their numbers. Someone else suggested that perhaps a hunter was responsible for the goat's death, but we quickly dismissed that idea. Hunters weren't allowed to hunt while they were units training. Well, this went on for the next few days. Dead goats, all mutilated beyond recognition, were turning up around the AHA. Every time they were discovered a few dozen meters closer. I suggested to Sergeant Hart that we should call the COC and tell them what was going on, but he flatly refused. Sergeant Hart apparently got into some trouble because of the fight I got into, and now company leadership was questioning his competence. He was up for promotion to staff sergeant and didn't want another incident out here to jeopardize that. I tried to protest, but I stopped myself. And I knew from experience that an argument between a sergeant and a lance corporal only ended one way. More days passed, more maimed goats, their corpses inching closer and closer to our sanctuary. During our watch, me and Davidson would try and see what was causing the depopulation of the local goat community, but we never could. It was too dark. Our tiny flashlights only shone so far, and our NVGs were back in the armory in cantonment. It was a complete mystery to us. Well, until one night. During our watch, we were talking, just shooting the shit, when we heard a shrill scream. It sounded just like a person. We both jumped and spun toward the direction of the scream. We both let out a sigh of relief to see it was just a goat standing on a hill, illuminated by the moonlight, about 20 meters away from us. Those old YouTube videos are right. A goat scream sounds just like a human. Davidson started to approach the goat to scare it off. They weren't allowed in the AHA. As he was halfway to the goat, yelling at it to go away, the goat was suddenly pulled away behind the hill by something we couldn't see. Davidson did an about-face and sprinted back to where we were standing and past me, leaving me there, standing frozen in terror. The goat kept screaming and screaming until eventually it was silenced, presumably by whatever had taken it. I stood there frozen in place, too stunned by what I'd just witnessed to move. My trance was only broken when Davidson grabbed me from behind and tried to pull me back into the AHA. He must have realized I hadn't been running with him, and he came back for me. We immediately woke up Sergeant Hart and told him what we'd seen. He didn't believe us, or at least not completely. He told us that it must have been a wolf or a coyote or bear, and that it wouldn't bother us because they were afraid of people. He knew damn well that none of those animals lived out here. He just didn't care. He told us to get back on watch, or he would make this last week we were here a living hell. Me and Davidson begrudgingly went back on post. But this time we didn't talk or joke around. We just lay in the prone, our unloaded rifles pointing in the direction of our unseen enemy. We found what was left of the goat the next morning, just behind the hill. All day the next day we begged Sergeant Hart not to put us on watch outside the perimeter of the AHA. We argued that it was unnecessary from a security standpoint, as there was a tall fence that surrounded the AHA. He told us that he didn't care, and it was our punishment for fighting each other and embarrassing him. We then offered to stand fire watch the whole night, every night for the last few days we were here, just behind the fence. Me and Davidson both sighed in relief when he agreed to those terms. It was exhausting having to stand a full 8-hour shift every night for the rest of the week, but it was worth it. We'd hoped what Sergeant Hart had said was true, and that whatever it was, it would be afraid of people and not try to enter the AHA. Well, it never did, but we were glad that we would be leaving in the next few days, so we didn't have to find out if it would. Things were looking up. The field exercise was over. I'd survived being out in the wilderness for a month and a half, and as soon as I got back to our base, I'd be starting the process of getting out of the Marines. Yeah, things were good. Well, everything went to shit on that last night. Part 2. The night had started pretty good. Sergeant Hart had decided that after a month of constantly being on watch, we'd learned our lesson, and he gave us the night off. Went to bed early that night, happy to be getting the first full 8 hours of sleep since we got there. My slumber was interrupted by something I had become accustomed to, Sergeant Hart's angry screaming. "What do you mean he's gone?" Sergeant Hart barked at the young PFC. "I don't know, Sergeant. I looked inside his tent to get him for his watch, and he was gone," the PFC stuttered back. Private Locke had a pretty hard time in the Marine Corps, and that's saying something coming from me. Locke had trouble adjusting to the rigors of life in the infantry, and to make a long story short, he couldn't do it. Since he'd arrived at the unit a few months ago, he was the constant victim of bullying and hazing. Now, to cope with this, he turned to self-meditation. He popped on a piss test right before we came out here, and he was due to be kicked out with not an honorable discharge when he returned. According to one of the other Marines present, Locke had mentioned that he was going to go AWOL and catch a flight back home. The Marine thought he was joking and didn't think anything of it. But now, a few hours later, Locke's tent was empty and his day pack was gone. Great. This is the last fucking thing I needed, Sergeant Hart growled. He then turned to me and said, "You, Davidson, PFC dumbass here, are going to go find him and bring him back." I immediately objected. "Sergeant, you can't be serious. It's the middle of the night. It's dark as fuck out and we don't know which way he went. We need to call this in." I didn't mention the real reason I didn't want to go, because I knew he still wouldn't believe me. Ah, fuck no, Sergeant Hart snapped. If I call this into the COC, I'm fucked, which by extension means you're all fucked. Shit rolls downhill. I doubted that any of this could be blamed on the rest of us, aside from the guys who'd previously stood firewatch and didn't stop him from leaving, and the guy who heard Locke mention he was leaving and didn't say anything. Well, for the first time in my Marine Corps career, I was entirely blameless for a bad situation. Sergeant Hart could tell I knew this and sighed. Look, he couldn't have gone far, and if I had to guess, the idiot probably took the main road back towards cantonment. If you move quickly, you'll catch him. I can't go because I'm the NCO in charge. I can't leave the rest of the Marines here unattended. For all I know, if I leave, more people would run off. Sergeant Hart gave me a pleading look. Aside from myself, you're the most senior guy here. I trust you to get this done. In hindsight, I shouldn't have let that convince me to go. I should have grabbed the radio myself and called it in, and let Hart get fucked over, but I didn't. Throughout my time in the Marines, I'd always been treated, deservedly, as an incompetent individual who couldn't be trusted with any sort of responsibility. So having a sergeant give me an actual important task and tell me he trusted me to complete it convinced me. After all that time, despite all my shitbaggery, I still had some sense of motivation. Now, myself, Davidson, and Scott, the PFC who discovered that Locke was missing, were sent out back down the dirt road toward cantonment, the route Sergeant Hart had believed Locke had gone. Davidson had agreed to go with me because he figured that there was strength in numbers, that whatever was out there killing the ghosts could have killed us all in the AHA but didn't, because it must have been afraid of large groups of people. Scott came with us because he was a boot and would do whatever the fuck we told him to do. Sergeant Hart told us that if we didn't find Locke within an hour, we could call him on the 152 and then he'd radio it in as a last resort. At the time, that felt reasonable. As we made our way down the road, me and Davidson kept our heads on a swivel, on the lookout not only for Locke, but whatever ungodly nightmare that may be lurking in the shadows. It was a cold night, like always, and for once the sky was clear of clouds. It had been almost an hour since we'd left, and all three of us were ready to call the sergeant and tell him we'd failed. I brought the radio to my ear and pressed the key-in button. Echo 5 Hotel. This is Echo 3 Tango. Radio check, I said into the radio. Echo 5 Hotel. This is Echo 3 Tango. Radio check, I said again. Echo 5 Hotel. This is... I was cut off by 3 loud beeps emitted from the radio. I looked at the radio's display to see the bar representing the radio's battery life was just a small sliver. Oh, fuck, I exclaimed angrily, and I exchanged a glance with Davidson. Did, you happen to bring an extra battery? I asked. He gave me an annoyed look. You're the one carrying the radio. You'd be the one in charge of having batteries. I sighed. He was right. Damn it, the first time I was ever entrusted with something important and I'd already fucked up the most basic thing. No wonder I kept getting non-wrecked. We should probably head back, Scott piped up. Sergeant Hart is expecting us to call him soon, and if he doesn't hear from us, he'll assume something happened. If we run, we can probably get back in 20 minutes. Well, he's right, Davidson chimed in. If Sergeant doesn't hear back from us, he'll be more pissed than before. I reluctantly agreed. I knew Sergeant Hart would be angry that we couldn't find Locke, but at that point I didn't care. I was getting out in a few months. Soon all of this will just be a shitty memory to add to my collection of shitty memories. All right, let's get... I was cut off by a shrill shriek that pierced through the night air. All three of us turned and faced the direction of the noise. Standing on top of a small hill adjacent to the road, illuminated by the moonlight, was Locke. Oh, he looked ragged and dirty, like he'd just gotten out of a 2-week field op with zero rest, and his uniform was torn to shreds and covered in blood. He was panting and gasping for air, like he'd just run a marathon, and he was on his knees, like he'd just crawled up the other side of the hill. Locke, you dumbass boot, I said, ignoring his disheveled appearance. Where have you been? We've been looking everywhere for you. I growled at him. I really don't know what had come over me. Perhaps it was all the anger and frustration building up over my entire mediocre career, compounded by the month and a half spent out in the field, finally boiling over. I laid into lock. When we get back to the AHA, I'm personally going to fuck you up. Then Sergeant Hart's going to fuck you up. And when we get back to the containment, I'm going to... My tirade was cut off by the animal that pounced on Locke. That's the best way I can describe it, an animal. Though it didn't look like any animal I'd ever seen. If I had to describe it in greater detail, I'd say it was a cross between multiple different animals. It had the head of a bat, the body of a man, and the claws of a mountain lion. Claws that were currently tearing into Private Locke's torso and ripping out his spine. Me and Davidson immediately booked it. We ran back down the road towards the AHA. After about 100 meters, I realized Scott wasn't with us, though. He must have done what I did the first time I encountered this thing and froze up. I turned back just in time to see the creature decapitate him. I gagged and tried to resist the urge to vomit, which wasn't helped by the fact that this was the fastest I'd ever run in my life. "Where's Scott?" Davidson panted. "It's fucking killed him," I gasped back. "What should have let us bring our fucking rifles?" Davidson angrily exclaimed. Davidson tried to convince Sergeant Hart to let us bring our rifles and some ammunition, but he refused. He didn't want to risk us losing them or having a negligent discharge. He insisted that if there was something out there, it probably wouldn't bother us. He was a sergeant, so he knew better than we did. It felt like we were running for hours, but in reality, it must have only been a few minutes. I could see the lights of the AHA. We were so close. I figured that if we made it back, we'd be safe, because it had never tried to get into the AHA before. Maybe it did fear large groups of people. We just didn't bring enough with us this time. I noticed in my peripheral vision that Davidson had fallen behind me a bit. Now, Davidson was not a good runner. The whole reason he was on AHA duty was because he'd failed the PFT. After a few more minutes of running, he fell to his knees, gasping for air. "Oh my God. Oh fuck," he panted. "I can't go on. I can't breathe." I stopped and screamed at him. "Davidson, get the hell up. Come on, we're almost there." I can't breathe." He looked up at me with a pleading look. "Throw me on your back. Carry me." I looked down at him and assessed the situation. Now, Davidson was a big dude, and I was a pretty scrawny one. Carrying him would slow me down tremendously. There was still just under a kilometer between us and the AHA. And there was a chance I could get back to the AHA with him on my back. But there's also a chance I wouldn't. I looked down the road. The human-bat hybrid was sprinting towards us. Even from a few hundred meters away, I could see its blood-soaked fangs. And we had a head start on it because it had spent a few minutes devouring Scott's corpse. I was very winded at this point, and I realized if I wanted to survive, I'd need another head start. Well, I'm ashamed to admit it, but I left Davidson behind. My leadership was right. I was a terrible Marine. I'd done the one thing a Marine is never supposed to do. I left another Marine behind to die to save my own life. Davidson kept screaming my name as I sprinted away from him. After I'd made it a few hundred meters away, he abruptly fell silent. I dashed through the front gate of the AHA, almost knocking over a very angry Sergeant Hart. I didn't stop to listen to whatever bullshit he was about to spew at me. I headed straight for the main radio. I pushed the boot operator to the side, picked up the microphone, and without any radio etiquette in mind whatsoever, I screamed, "Help! Help!" over and over again until I passed out. I was later told that I passed out from heat exhaustion, but based on the bruise on the back of my skull and the migraines that I suffer to this day, I suspect Sergeant Hart bludgeoned me over the head with his rifle. But my plea over the radio got some attention. When I woke up, I was in a naval hospital. As soon as I was awake, a nurse came in and told me to stay put, and that someone was going to speak to me. Before I could ask her for more information, she turned around and walked out. I tried to get up, but that's when I realized I was handcuffed to the bed. A few minutes later, a man in a suit entered the room. I don't think I'm allowed to go into full detail about what we spoke about, but what I can tell you is that, officially, Private David Locke, Private First Class Lewis Scott, and Lance Corporal Matthew Davidson were killed by unexploded ordnance when they wandered off into the training area. I was told that I'd be added to that casualty list if I didn't sign some papers saying that this was the case, and I wouldn't speak about what I'd experienced that night. I was told that everyone else present at the AHA was signing similar papers. I had no choice. All he told me about the creature I saw was that they were aware of his existence and that the situation was under control. I left the Marine Corps a few months after that. By the grace of God, I somehow got out with an honorable discharge. I tried to forget that night and move on with my life. Started college, got a part-time job, even took up reading as a hobby, which is something I'd never thought I'd do. This was all several years ago, and I thought I'd moved past that night, and my time in the Marines as a whole. But recent events have changed that. I kept in contact with a few of the guys who were there that last night. Surprisingly, most are still in the fleet and are now NCOs. We didn't really talk about what happened. Most of them didn't really get the whole story. The whole real story, anyway. A few months ago, someone posted an obituary in our group chat. It's for a Staff Sergeant Daniel Hart. According to the obituary, he was killed in a training accident at the same base where all of this shit went down. At first, I thought it was karma at work. After all, he was the one who sent me and my friends to our deaths so he wouldn't get in trouble. But a few weeks later, I saw on Facebook that another one of the Marines who was there that night had died too. According to the memorial post on Facebook, he died from a congenital heart defect. I couldn't believe that. The Marine in question was a PT stud, and I doubted he could have been in the Marines for as long as he was without any symptoms showing. And as the weeks went on, I kept seeing obituaries and memorial posts popping up, all for the guys who were at the AHA that night. The causes of death were all crazy things. Car accidents, training accidents, undiagnosed medical conditions, stuff like that. By my count, I'm the only one left, which is why I'm writing this. I don't think I have much time left. For the past few days, I've been locked in my room. I'm afraid to go outside. I'm being watched. From my window, I can occasionally see a black van drive by. I know it's the same one every time from the license plate. I swear I can hear a helicopter fly by every so often. Helicopters have never flown by my apartment before last week. I'm praying to God this is all just one big coincidence, that I'm just losing my mind. What I do know is that if this is all real, I'm not going to let them make my death look like an accident. I'm perfectly healthy, I don't have any dangerous hobbies, and my job isn't dangerous. I'm not planning on hurting myself. If they come for me, I'm going to fight. No, they won't be able to make this look like an accident. Can I Come In? By 035 Growing up playing video games and watching war movies, I didn't hesitate to join the Marines so that I could be in the infantry. I went through all of the training and unwelcome hardship that makes you really reconsider your decision. Anyway, I got stationed to a desert base known as 29 Palms, the largest piece of military-controlled land in the US. It covers approximately 930 square miles in total. Yeah, it's fucking huge. In Southern California and a few hours from Mexico. When you're that far out, you start to see some shit. Anyway, fast forward to my first field op and me losing my shit. To put things in perspective as to how far away we are from civilization, the closest man-made object is a 3-hour ride away. Now this day was particularly hot because it broke 130, as if the sun said, I told you I could. So, we spent all day hiding under camouflage netting getting classes about various military tactics. Once the sun set, we set off into the night to get some hard, realistic training done. At night, we practiced using our night vision optic to do simple shit like reloading and reading maps. It produces an image off of ambient infrared light, so you can actually see a lot more shit than the naked eye. Now, let me tell you, the sky is absolutely cluttered with stars. I can see a shooting star every few seconds. Ooh, the Milky Way. It's pretty darn cool. Finally, after roaming around aimlessly for what felt like forever, we head back and we're granted a few hours of sleep. I lay down and start to drift off. I'm suddenly woken up after what felt like 10 minutes, and I get up instantly. Get up, bitch. You're on watch. God damn it. I get dressed and I stand my post dutifully, like I'm told at the checkpoint. I'm given a radio and told to only lift the barbed wire after it gets approved over the radio. It's maybe around 2 a.m., and everyone else in my company is dead asleep, except for myself and an officer in the comm truck. All I can hear are the coyotes. I decide to start looking at the stars with my night vision. I hear a coyote yelp off in the distance, but think nothing of it. A few minutes later, another Marine comes over a small hill in front of me. Nothing crazy, probably taking a dump. He walks towards me, but his eyes don't reflect any light. Rationally, one of us is probably dehydrated, so I think nothing of it. He approaches me, and after a few seconds of staring at me, he simply says, "Can I come in?" His voice didn't sound right. No inflection or questioning tone. Weird. I asked him what his name was, and why he was out so far taking a dump. He tells me his name, Sergeant Wright, and he ignores my dump question. Same weird voice. Granted, I'm new to the unit, so I don't know anyone named Sergeant Wright, but I still had to verify it. Main, this is Rogue Guard 1. There's a Sergeant Wright requesting entry. Over. Rogue Guard 1, this is Main. There is no Sergeant Wright in this company, and the closest unit is 25 miles away. Make sure... No, shit, get the fuck back here right now. Don't let him in or even look at him. Run! As the weird dude started to hear this, his face changed to severe anger. Like he wanted to rip my throat out and drink my blood. By the time I got back, everyone is awake. All of the vehicle lights are turned on, and everyone is packing up, scrambling into the trucks. We leave a lot of shit behind, like the tents, water, and food, and drive the entire 3 hours back. I never got an explanation from anyone, but my squad leader, who was a simple, backwards kind of guy, who bluntly said that whatever I saw wasn't asking to get through the gate. After my most recent creepy experience with weird-looking people scaring the fuck out of me, we went somewhere much more terrifying. A remote little Marine Corps base called Bridgeport. It's in a national forest just north of Yosemite. It was built to train Marines in the art of mountain warfare. There's a lot of mountains. It's cold, it's windy, and if you ever go there, well, you'll hate your life too. Anyway, when we first get there, we stay in these creepy concrete huts with bunk beds in them. There's a bathroom and some showers, and that's about it. You fight over the outlets to charge your electronics, and there's not really any heat besides a bunch of Marines cramped into one area. The first few days are miserable. Your body has to adjust to the new altitude. The air has less oxygen, so physical work and exercise plays out in slow motion. Oh, and you're constantly tired, and all you want to do is sleep. There isn't much in terms of fresh food, and things can get pretty bleak if you have the wrong mindset. No, you wouldn't believe me if I told you these were the better times, eh? Eventually, we march up into the mountains carrying our ridiculously heavy packs, stuffed to the brim with warming layers, food, water, and nicotine. The first few days were easy. We would hike all day and stop to rest and learn a few things on survival and such. There was some snow on the lower parts, but not a ton, thankfully. Around the fourth night, someone had the awesome idea of making us practice our nighttime navigation skills. I'm a pretty decent navigator myself, so I was up for the challenge. No big deal. They hand out the compasses, maps, and protractors, and set up an elaborate system of how to get to the finish line. It was staggered so people weren't walking all over each other. Now this is where things get interesting. I'm in the woods. It's dark and cold. I hate my life, so I'm stumbling through the trees and brush, loud as hell without a care in the world. I just want to finish this dumb thing so I can go to sleep. I get to my first point easily because there's some moonlight shining through the trees. The second one was placed in a fucking river, and I still remember how livid I was standing there, copying down the word donkey etched into an ammo can on top of a rock in a freezing cold river. Wet boots will drive a man insane. I stop to squeeze out the moisture from my socks, and I get this primal feel that I'm being watched. I stand completely still, and all I can hear is my heart beating. No wind or wildlife, just me. My first thought is it's a Marine trying to piggyback off my success. I put on my soggy boots and do what anyone would do. I crest the next hill and stop so I could listen. Nothing. Maybe I'm just freaking the fuck out. Screw this. I keep walking. 10 minutes later, and I get the same feeling. Any rookie stalker knows that you have to match the person's step so they don't hear you. So, I start randomly stopping or changing my step. After a few wholehearted tries, I don't hear any footsteps, but I do hear breathing. It's as if a mountain lion or something crazy. I have no choice but to keep walking and hope I can pull my dull Gerber knife out in time. About this time, I get to my third point and plot my final point. It's near a road, so I cut straight east and literally book it up the road. I still felt like I was being followed the entire time, but I felt safer because I could hear the low roar of a Humvee engine up the road. Looking back, I lead, whatever it was, right to the rest of us. Damn, that was a dumb mistake. Nothing else happens that night. Everyone else gives up and just uses the roads to make it to camp. Those who don't make it back are told to walk towards the sound of a beeping horn. Funny. I get to sleep in the safety of numbers. We use the next day to remediate our nighttime land nav skills and refuel our bodies with food. Once the sun sets, we march off into the mountains in a file. Unfortunately, since I carry a rocket launcher, my natural position is in the back. But not the very last, so that's a positive. We spend the early night hiking. We were moving very fast and probably 20 meters spaced apart. At times it was common to lose sight of each other. All of us were slowly getting exhausted. Suddenly, shit gets dark. Like the ambient light is just being absorbed. I get that same primal fear. Extreme silence. Yeah. Fuck. I keep walking without a word until I hear someone, probably the guy behind me, call my name. I turn around and he looks at me like I'm an idiot. What the fuck, man? Keep going, dude. They're gonna lose us. Okay. Weird. Who called my name? I spin back around and try to see my way through the brush for the guy in front of me. I get a glimpse of him and discreetly yell at him to slow down, but he doesn't even hear me. What the fuck? About the same time, I hear from behind me, "Dude, what the fuck is..." I heard a light rustling of leaves and some twigs, but that's it. I run back maybe 15 meters, which isn't far, but at night it is. There's nothing but his pack on the ground and his rifle. I call out his name. Nothing. I reach for my radio. It's dead. I turn on both of my flashlights. Dead. Fuck. 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 I start yelling. I blow the rape whistle that they made me pack. Nothing. I don't know how long it took them to realize I was missing, and how they backtracked their way to me, but it felt like hours. I could feel whatever it was out there, waiting, just fucking toying with me. I told them everything, and they were convinced the guy just got lost. They all spread out and looked for him for a few hours, but ultimately came up with nothing. Sometime the next morning, one of the hippie park volunteers found him 30 kilometers away across multiple mountains. He was bleeding from his ears, didn't even know his name. Of course, he was in extreme hypothermia, and he had a ton of bruises on him, but no severe bleeding. They ended up getting a helicopter to take him to the nearest hospital. Following the mysterious incident, I was told I was going to be sent down the mountain to answer a few questions. To be honest, I was relieved. It was cold and I didn't want to hike anymore. Everyone else in my company sort of just believed what we were told. He came down with mountain sickness and just walked 30 kilometers over the course of a few hours. I tried to tell a few people about all the creepy shit I'd been noticing, just to make sure I'm not going crazy. Before anyone could respond, my squad leader pulled me aside and told me, "Don't talk about these things, okay?" Maybe he knew something I didn't. But yeah, cool. They sent us up here knowing something was fucking off. Typical military BS. Just stick our heads in the sand and pretend everything is great. I was glad I was leaving for a few days, but there was nothing but complete dread whenever the idea of coming back entered my mind. The Humvee to take me back down finally showed up, and the ride was uneventful. They took me to a small, concrete office-like building. The military police guys were just like me and had a job to do. They got a statement and asked if I noticed the guy doing anything unusual before he disappeared. Nope, seemed normal to me. The NCIS guys came in then. I've dealt with them before for something else, and they're usually good-natured guys. Well, not these ones. Brisk, to the point, and methodical. They read off all the facts about the case like they were reading the nutrition info on a cereal box. Unsurprised and monotone. They'd definitely seen this before. They asked the same questions. When I told them about all the creepy things I'd noticed, they told me that I was probably suffering from mountain sickness too. I was beyond pissed, but I knew better than to argue with them. Another thing. They asked me if I'd taken any pictures that day. I told them I hadn't, but I thought that was strange. Next, they asked if they could swap my boots. To this day, I'm honestly confused as to why the hell they did that. I don't know if they were fucking with me, or if it was part of something else. My only assumption is that this thing alters the surrounding area on a microscopic level. Maybe there was isotope it produces that might have stayed on my boots. I have no clue. But if anyone has any similar stories or information on why they did that, please let me know. At the conclusion of my interview, they made me sign a document stating I wouldn't talk about anything,
They would contact me when I was free to disclose any information. This was a few years ago, and they never got back to me. So it may not be legal to talk now, but I have a card up my sleeve that I'm not going to talk about. Anyway, I walked back to our fabulous 5-star concrete hut to get some sleep. Thankfully, I wasn't alone, as there were a few guys that stayed back because they had sickle cell anemia and could actually die if they went above a certain altitude. I took one of the best hot showers I've ever had in my life and headed to my bunk. I was exhausted, but I couldn't sleep. Now, I rarely smoke, but I still carry a pack on me just to make lucrative trades or sell to desperate nicotine fiends in the field. I felt like now was a good time to smoke, so I went outside. Maybe it would calm me down. All was going well until that dreadful feeling came back again. Shit, the tree line was maybe 40 meters away. I don't know how the hell it followed me, or why. Could there be more than one? I stomped out my cigarette and went back inside. I managed to calm myself down and fall asleep, but I would always wake up suddenly after maybe 10 minutes. No dreams, just the overwhelming feeling that you're being observed. The next day, I packed all of my gear into the Humvee and helped the driver load some stuff into the back. The drive was uneventful, and I managed to catch some sleep, only to be woken up by rough terrain here and there. When we finally arrived, it was almost afternoon, and the company was preparing to cover some serious terrain that day. Just my luck. Before I knew it, we were trotting up the steep mountainside. I didn't think it could get any worse until it began to sleet heavily. Jeez, it was bad. The wind picked up and it felt like we were being cut with glass. I couldn't see. People were getting lost and the rocks were slippery. We hiked for hours upon hours, and I swear these mountains were trying to kill us. The sun began to set, and our clothes began to freeze on us. If that wasn't bad enough, I noticed that our compasses were acting weird. No matter how hard you tried, you would eventually end up walking towards the base of a particular mountain that was nicknamed Devil's Incline on our map. This was a military map that someone had made in the 1980s. I don't know if I'll be able to find it again. Coincidentally, I also got that same feeling of being stalked again. Fuck. Anyhow, our guides get us to the right destination, a place called Sardine Rock. As soon as we stop, people start shaking violently because they are no longer hiking and producing zero body heat. Someone was smart enough to predict this and had 2-man tents driven up to our rendezvous point on massive trucks. We rarely use tents, but this was literally a life or death situation. To make things worse, the wind picked up and it started to downpour violently. You couldn't hear yourself talk. It was chaos. If you've ever set up a tent in the wind, you'll know how impossible it is. By the time we had everything staked in, the tent had a few inches of water at the bottom. Our sleeping systems are waterproof, but our entire bodies were soaked to the bone, so they eventually became wet from the outside in. Then the temperature dropped, and things got worse. Being in the military, you always have to have someone on watch. Since there was still sunlight out, I volunteered to stand it while everyone else hid in their tents. Jeez, worst day of my life. Finally, I got back inside of my tent and tried to get some rest. I don't remember falling asleep, but I was suddenly woken up to someone outside asking for help. It was the same voice as the guy who ended up 30 kilometers away. Except, that guy is still in the hospital. He would call out someone's name and say it a few times, and then try to get them outside. I think it was my squad leader who yelled at everyone to stay the fuck in our tents and not to go outside. For the next few minutes, he practically begged us. It sounded like he was in the tree line, maybe 20 meters away, somehow guessing our names. Here it was, trying to break us down when we were at our lowest point. Could have gotten right through our tents, but, well, it just wanted to fuck with us. Finally, it stopped, and just as I thought it was gone, I heard it say my name twice, in a taunting kind of tone. Then a huge tree came tumbling down, and that was it. Traumatized, everyone stayed inside their tents until we heard trucks coming. Over the radio, we were told to pack our tents in less than 30 seconds and get on the trucks. We had no more than 5 minutes. I wasn't going to be the first one to step outside, so I waited until a good number of people got out. I've never seen a group of people move faster in my life. The tents were stuffed into their bags, poles bent, and bags were halfway on our bodies. People practically stumbled into the trucks. We were told that we were being evacuated due to terrible conditions, and we were heading back to base. But we all knew the real reason. I was relieved to be out of the cold, but we were still on this damn mountain, and that thing would still be able to find us. When we got back, we all showered and got into dry clothes. No one talked. They just went to sleep and tried to understand what had gone down that day. Each and every single one of them realizing that we would likely go back up there in a few days. The next morning, after being evacuated, everyone was obviously exhausted, and a few guys were sick with pneumonia. Being wet, cold, and nearly scared to death really took a toll. I don't think the incident with the thing outside our tents was talked about in large groups, but it was definitely talked about off on the side. A few guys maintained the fact that it was just a great big prank and laughed it off, but whenever they laughed, it was like they were asking for some form of validation. Even in the rear, we were kept busy cleaning weapons and gear and getting ready for whatever was next. Our unit has an unexplainable obsession with training, and it really cut into our morale. But at least it made time go by fast. Life seemed pretty normal despite the weather. I stayed indoors at all times unless we were exercising. I didn't have the heart to tell anyone who was probably watching us from the trees, even if I didn't feel it. The farthest I'd ventured was maybe a week after coming down the mountain. The base is a small store with an inventory identical to a gas station. I'd gotten tired of what they were feeding us, and my mind had started to rationalize all of my fear away. And so, I went. Nothing crazy happened, but I did, however, notice there were people there who were definitely not Marines. These guys were big, burly, and sported full beards. I pretended to look at the selection of Doritos and caught a glimpse of a very particular trident tattoo. This meant that whoever this person was a Navy SEAL, currently or at some point. I wonder about the other guys. I approached the bearded guy and simply asked him if he was a SEAL. When he turned around to look at me, he simply looked and said, "Yeah, sure. How'd you know?" The tattoo is a dead giveaway. I used to see my college roommate hang all that moto shit up in his room. "Oh, really?" was all he said. I didn't know what to say, but I wanted to impress him. He's actually a SEAL now. His demeanor got a little friendly. "Oh, shit. What's his name?" "Kurtz. He's an officer." "Is his first name Walter?" "Yeah, it is. Do you know him?" "Do I know him? He's outside smoking a cigarette." Now, a little info on my friend. We worked out a lot together as we both had a sick fascination with pain. Either running, hiking, or swimming. We would torture ourselves nearly every day until he left. I kept up with him as he went through all the training cycles. Then he just disappeared. I'm talking gone from every fucking form of social media. I talked to his parents, and all they got from him was the occasional letter. It always bothered the hell out of me that he straight up disappeared from the world without saying a damn thing. I thought about it nearly every day. There he was, outside, and all I wanted to do was get one good punch in. Navy SEAL or not, he still a dick. When we stepped outside and I saw him, I still hated his guts, but I had a feeling that me versus a bunch of Navy SEALs probably wasn't going to work, despite having the power of God and anime on my side. He didn't even notice me until I'd said his name. In any other setting, I probably should have saluted since he was an officer and I was enlisted scum, but I didn't give a shit. He seemed genuinely happy to see me and wouldn't let go of my hand. We did some catching up, mostly questions from him about my boring life. Whenever I'd asked him stuff, he would deflect, make a joke, or give me a one-word answer. The man just would not elaborate about what he's been up to. After about 10 minutes of talking, the group of them decided they were just about done stocking up on Mountain Dew and gummy worms. Before they headed back, Kurtz pulled me aside and threw his cigarette to the ground. With a look of complete concern and worry, he said, "Listen, you really shouldn't go back up there. This ain't the place you want to be. You understand?" I wasn't really sure what to say. I just nodded solemnly before he shook my hand and left. That was the last time I've been able to talk to him. One thing to note is that that group of guys didn't all have beards or tattoos. Don't get me wrong here, but Navy guys do have a certain look. I can't explain it unless you've been around them long enough, but not everyone in that group was a SEAL. I saw one guy wearing an army-related t-shirt, so I'm guessing they were some form of cross-branch team. Anyway, I headed back to the concrete hotels and spent some time reading, just trying to get my mind off what he had said. Should I break my ankle or pretend to be sick? They don't have Uber here, and the highway is quite some distance away. Ultimately, I decided that my pride was more important than my life. I ended up going back into the mountains. Jeez, I felt nothing but dread. Here I was being stalked and harassed by something. And on top of that, the Marine Corps is destroying my body every day. The human body isn't designed to hike 170 kilometers in a week with 200 pounds of gear, let alone up mountains. However, sometimes you get a break. The hikes were relatively short, and all we did was practice our rock climbing skills at night. After about 3 weeks in these mountains, my body started to get used to the altitude and the amount of physical activity we were doing. I was counting down the days in my head every few minutes, making quick calculations and crunching the numbers on each activity and how much closer I was to safety. Things weren't going to be that easy, of course. I had a pretty decent amount of anxiety and dread this entire time, but I rationalized that it was just my mind. I didn't notice until the third day, when we peaked on one of the larger mountains, that we were headed for Devil's Incline. It had to be a mistake, because the compasses were acting weird, right? I talked to a few of the higher-ups, and sure enough, that was our final destination, because the CO thought it would be a challenge. Oh, great. They're leading us straight to our deaths. Dulce decorum est kind of deal. The closer we got there, the worse I felt about this whole thing. I couldn't sleep for more than 10 minutes because I swear I could feel it watching me. Not wanting to go crazy, I confided with my squad leader, and all he said was, "Yeah, I feel it. Don't want to talk about it." The next day we were briefed on our final training exercise. Our job was to assault to the peak of Devil's Incline. The vast majority of it would be climbed using carabiners and rope and traditional techniques. The final 500 meters is mostly gravel and can be traversed on foot. We would be provided overwatch by special forces operating in the area. Nothing new. The military is imaginative. If we see them, ignore them. We begin the assault at sunset and get to the middle of the mountain around midnight. Everything's going smooth. We're climbing the cliffs slowly and methodically. On one particularly large cliff, I set up one of the anchor points so the Marines can rappel from another side of the cliff. I turn around and head for the next cliff. Before I start to climb, somebody angrily asked me why the hell I cut the line that I could have gotten someone killed. I respond that I didn't cut the line and head back to see what the hell had happened. The rope was sliced perfectly, like surgically almost. If you've ever cut climbing rope before, you'll know that it's almost impossible to get such a clean cut. You'll always have a tiny bit of fraying, even with the sharpest of knives. This rope had no fraying at all. I'm assuming that this was the same thing that's been harassing us all month, trying his best to kill us. Fortunately, there weren't many cliffs after that. The 500-meter slope of gravel turned out to be way too steep to hike straight up. Also, out of nowhere, a blizzard decided to make our lives hell. To this day, I've never seen such terrible weather. We're talking 70 miles an hour winds, whiteout conditions, everything. It was insane. On the way up, I swore I was gonna freeze to death. The slope seemed like it would never end. After about 3 hours, someone had mentioned that multiple Marines were missing. Our first reaction was to stop and sit there for an hour, and then send half of us back down in an attempt to find those Marines. That was the coldest I'd ever been in my life. At least hiking provided some warmth, but sitting there being buried alive in snow and wind, yeah, it was bad. I don't know who made the call to keep pushing forward to the top, but it was the only way anyone was going to survive. There was a road on the other side of the mountain with vehicles most likely waiting for us. There was no use kicking around anymore for Marines in the snow, because things were just getting worse. Pretty much everyone had some form of frostbite. We just didn't have the right gear to protect ourselves. Finally, we got to the top, and thankfully there are tents waiting for us. The tent I'd got was broken, so I ended up piling in with a bunch of other guys like a bunch of sardines. Jeez, what a shit show that was, setting up in the wind. They gave us maybe 20 minutes while they figured out what to do with the missing guys. I'm assuming they called the proper authorities way before that. It was way too windy for helicopters, and nearly impossible for even us to search the area. The wrong gust of wind could literally blow us down the mountain, tumbling face first. Their solution was to first use our thermal optics from the top and search for the guys that way. Nothing. Then we all got in a big line and held hands as we walked down the mountain. Nothing. Granted, we didn't bring our 200 pounds of crap with us, so it was a lot easier walking back up. But by now it was 4 a.m. and it seemed to be getting worse. They told us to go back to our tents and warm up for 20 minutes because guys were literally turning into zombies. Now, this is quite possibly the weirdest part. For the next 12 hours, no one remembers what the hell happened. Everyone woke up in their tents and has absolutely zero recollection. It was daytime now and everywhere was covered in snow. A few of the Special Forces guys, including Kurtz, were talking to all of my higher-ups about something. I didn't find out until later that the SF dudes found all of our missing guys at various locations. Not 30 kilometers far, but much shorter distances like 5 to 10 kilometers. Ears bleeding too. While that's not impossible to hike in a few hours, it's damn hard to get lost on a mountain where your only objective is to go up. Not to the side, or around or down. Up, damn it. We radioed that in, and the base camp sent special vehicles designed for the snow to get them. They kinda resembled half-tracks. The same day, they loaded us up on these special snow trucks and told us we were going back to the barracks. When we got there, we were debriefed on how successful our mission was, and some BS about accountability of the guys. Blah, blah. In any other situation, they would have lost their jobs if they lost a Marine. Just not in Bridgeport, I guess. We packed up our bags that night and got woken around 3 a.m. to get on a bus back to the desert. I was extremely relieved to be back. No one ever really talked about our time there again. The guys who disappeared always came back from the hospital saying they didn't remember anything, or that they didn't want to talk about it. Wow. All I can say is, never go to Bridgeport, folks.
Okay, so to anyone who thought I was even remotely dissing the military in the intro, absolutely not. But yeah, my father was in the military. Saw some things that no man, no human should ever see. And as a result, my mum was like, no way whatsoever are you ever being part of that. Yeah, okay. Some personal stories maybe to tell in the future, but not right now, to tell you the truth. My father-in-law was also in the military. He was very high up in the Turkish Air Force. Very much respected. So a lot of this is why I'm a big fan of Taxi Dancer's story. He's one of those controversial writers I've ever featured on the channel, and I love his work because I have this utmost respect. And a lot of you who've like, he does this and he does that, have absolutely no idea where he was coming from. Anyway, he's disappeared for a while, so hopefully he's coming back. Special shout out to you, Taxi Dancer, at the end of this one. Anyway, I'm moving into the waffling territory now. So that is it for this week. Back again on Sunday with the culmination of that post-apocalypse zombie story that I started last Sunday. Lots more to come in that, but I will be finishing it on Sunday, so please join me again. Okay, all right. Till then, my dear friends, very, very sweet dreams, and bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye.